All right. So, coming to
Good job.
good evening. I'm Phil Brown from iTDi.
And I'm Stephen Herder, also from iTDi, and some days are easier than others. And this day has left you outside. Why are you outside, Phil?
Yeah, so I'm here coming to you live from Malaysia at a local restaurant with a better Wi-Fi than the one in my house that's currently just being disconnected by our service provider. So always have a plan B.
There you go. A good teacher, always with a plan B.
Thank you. Behind me, you can see some flags, Malaysian flags flying. It's a national day coming up on the 31st, Monday. So we've got a long weekend ahead of us. How things you? Where are you in Japan?
I'm in Osaka, just between Osaka and Kyoto, in the relative warmth of my little room at home, and very happy to be here. We had such a great time last month. My expectations are a little bit high. Let's see how we do.
Excellent. Today I don't have the luxury of having a second screen at the moment, so I'm going to do my best to not be flying completely blind, but I have my PC in front of me. Thank you everyone for joining us from wherever you are. Please feel free to say hi in the chat, and we'll be able to kind of get a look at that in due course. Let us know where you're watching from, and it'd be great to hear from you as always. Today in our monthly roundup, we have our three usual segments that some of you may be familiar with. We basically have a quick recap on what you might have missed, and then we'll move into our main topic today, which is, Steve?
Which is reactive experiences. The title is What Else Is There for this whole section, but we're looking at our reactive experiences to emergency remote teaching. So, and also our proactive steps of where we go from here.
Absolutely.
As you said, we're zooming out around the world right now. So some of you are already back in the classroom. Some of you are just about to go in the classroom, and people like us here in Japan, we have a few more weeks before, at least 3 weeks before university begins again.
Right. And yeah, here in Malaysia, most of the schools went back in mid-July. So people being back for a month to 6 weeks. So also, just to kind of get an idea, feel free to put into the chat, what's your current situation? First of all, are you back at school already, or are you going to be returning to school? Obviously, a lot of like North America, Europe, and elsewhere, international schools, for example, they're returning in September. A few have gone back actually end of August, sometimes a bit early because of the shift in dates due to COVID-19 and so on. And then what is your actual situation? Are people, please let us know if you're like face-to-face or you're teaching online or mixed mode. And understandably, some people don't actually know. I know some people are still waiting for a decision ahead of going back next month. But hopefully you do know.
Nothing is very certain these days. And we're planning contingencies on our contingencies right now. At my university, and I'm at a couple of universities, the current plan is to go back face-to-face from around the end of September. And in classes that are more than 50 or 60 people, they've decided to go completely asynchronous, doing assignments online through our LMS inside the university. As much as we all struggled to get used to Zoom last term, and I had all kinds of, which might come up later, but I had all kinds of new goals for improving my teaching in Zoom. And then I was told a few days ago that we won't be having Zoom at all.
Right, so having to readjust.
It's totally a logistics, you know, once it was explained to me, the logistics of you can't have students at home on Zoom first period and then expected to be on campus an hour away for the second period, and vice versa. You can't have a whole bunch of students going face to face on campus and then hundreds and hundreds of students trying to get on the Wi-Fi system. It's just
It'll crash the school Wi-Fi, right?
yeah.
Yeah, there are kind of practical issues obviously faced by institutions as well as teachers, students, and so forth. Here in Malaysia, when they went back, they basically did 3 options depending upon schools and locations. It might be similar in your part of the world. Feel free to let us know. But basically, they gave schools, depending upon size and classroom sizes, student numbers, either they went back face-to-face and they split the classes in half with some taking like a morning session and others coming to school in the afternoon, or 1 week at school and then the other half of students would come the next week and the others then do remotely, which is a more complicated mixed mode.
Right.
And a few places we're going to stay online. Then we know from some friends in Korea, they were back in the classrooms happily, and then just this last week though, they've had to go back into kind of a lockdown basically in certain areas. So they're having to be prepared to go back online.
We have a couple of people have just come in. We've got Hilda Ura Ortiz from Lima, Peru. Welcome, nice to see you. And we have a fellow teacher here in Japan, John Ahern, is watching. So nice to see you both. And we'll be recording this as we are and putting it up on our YouTube channel. So yeah, if anybody comes in late, don't worry. We've got the whole thing. Okay.
And if you have anybody who you think would be interested in seeing anything afterwards, but they're not on Facebook, then we'll make another option to be able to share later.
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to move on into kind of looking at some of the reactive experiences to emergency remote teaching. Just briefly, kind of summarize some of the experiences that teachers have been sharing from the last 6 months before moving into talking about the more proactive things that we might be doing. And
are you going to start with things we've missed or not?
Yes, I missed that. So,
one more thing we've missed.
Yeah, indeed.
Listen, everybody,
Yep.
Phil is our technical wizard, and he found out, 7 minutes before we began that he had to rush out of the house, whip off to the local restaurant with only 1 screen. He usually has a couple. And so you're allowed 17 more mistakes during this hour. Okay?
Thank you, much appreciated.
Yep. And in the meantime, we've got Michael Free, a good friend in Korea, watching, and we've got Maria Stratton in Greece, and Romaisa Sabrine, and from Algeria, Yassine Alwa, a good friend of ours, and Effie is here from Greece, as well as Alicia from Europe.
Fantastic. So yeah, do share what your situation is, where you're from, say hi. There's about 20 others out there, so don't be a stranger. Feel free to join in as you wish, ask questions, comments, share any useful links or resources and experiences as well. So things have been going on, kind of 2 main things. We had Dorothy Zemach's course just back in July, that was, right? And we just wanted to share 3 things that has taken place since then. One of the really exciting things about this course is something comes out of it every time, right? People actually go get their materials or get their books published, and it's just wonderful to see those projects come to fruition. So I'm just going to share a quick glimpse. And the first, is it 2 or 3 things that have come out that have been published already, actually? Steve?
From past courses?
From this one. I mean, from past ones, there's been quite a number. I've lost count, actually.
Sure. And this one, I think there were 2 or 3 completed, but not quite published yet.
Okay. So here's the first one that's just out now on Amazon, and Recharge Your Teaching by Wilma Le. This one is now available. And
just to fill in, Wilma was in Japan for almost 20 years.
Wow.
She does a lot of teacher training, and she's a very, very wonderful, reflective teacher. She's just very calming and soothing whenever you talk with her. So I'm really thrilled that she's, took her a while to get this all together because there was so much in it.
Right.
It's wonderful.
And Dorothy herself also got her gift of the, is it Maggie or Magi? Right, I've got no idea. Something to learn. So that one's out as well. That came out during the time, right? And there are a couple more in the pipeline. So just want to share those. Congratulations to everyone who's getting their things out there.
Yeah. Dorothy is so good at this now that she picks a book she wants to produce during the month of our online course. And she uses it to show everybody all the steps involved.
Yes.
So it's such a practical course to help people. And certainly with COVID and 19 and everything else, more and more people are interested in exploring other avenues, to share stuff they have, as well as other income streams.
Yes, that's true. Then kind of setting up towards people going back to school, which has kind of been one of the big trending topics globally. We've kind of shared 3 main resources just in the last couple of weeks. So just kind of, if you've missed them, then take a quick look. You'll find the links on our page. But basically, these are kind of some useful starting points. OUP does this expert series, and on their page, one of the latest ones was actually from, sorry, I don't have the direct link at the moment. They was from Nikki Hockley, who's very well known for teaching online. And so she shares some excellent stuff in a position paper there. Then secondly, Edutopia, they nicely kind of basically put all of their relevant articles together for online learning, and a lot have kind of come out during the last 6 months, specifically dealing with remote learners and so on. Everything from connectedness and classroom environment to useful tips for actually, teaching and building community as well as interaction.
I just want to say that I've been reading Edutopia articles for a number of years. And I have yet to find anything that is not, or that is below excellent.
Right.
Absolutely everything they do. I would love to meet their curators and editors because I cannot endorse it or recommend it enough.
Right.
For having great practical and theoretically underpinned ideas and suggestions.
Yes. One of the things that I also love about it, even though sometimes people say, oh, but isn't it kind of focused on the US, which it is, and, I've never taught in the US, etc. But what I really like is that, you get perspectives from other subject teachers as well, not just language teachers, but things that are useful and relevant regardless of the subject you're teaching. So it's nice to get that cross-pollination of ideas and experiences to draw on.
Absolutely.
And then the other place that's been putting out so many different things, from resources to webinars and courses and so on as well, is the British Council. And they've nicely curated all of their support for teachers and teacher educators. I'm just going to skim through here. You can see they've basically shared everything from research to lesson plans, and they've divided them into kind of age groups as well as levels. And then they have their webinars and so on. So if you're looking for any particular topic that's relevant to you, then take a look there. It's a great starting point. So just pointing you to some useful places.
You've been a big fan of them for a while, haven't you?
Yeah, it's kind of increasingly so over the last few years as I've kind of got to know what they've got better as such. And also since they launched their Facebook group a couple of years ago to complement their Facebook page. It's a really active, supportive community. It's really well and professionally moderated. And so the quality of discussions and the help that teachers give each other is really excellent. So
it's wonderful to have the full weight of the British government behind your project, isn't it?
Yeah, they do help out, though they've had to ask for help during this last crisis in order to survive. So let's really hope that they do stay in there because they provide so much for teachers globally.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So I believe that's all from what you might have missed. Let's move on.
Hey, hey.
Just so let's
Remind,
take. Yep.
remind people that we're quite interested this time because of the global nature of different responses in COVID. Is tell us in the chat, what's your situation?
Yep.
Are you back at school already? Are you returning soon? And
Mhm.
what kind of context are you going to be working in? Face-to-face or online or some hybrid or mixed method, or completely asynchronous where people are just submitting assignments every week? So let us know what's happening and the location you're talking about, so we
Yes.
can share that information
Yeah.
among.
So some teachers in Brazil have also shared with us, including in the chat today, that they are all online. In Korea, there's a mixed mode. Friends in China, it depends on where they are. Mostly they're back in classrooms and so on.
Yeah.
And in Japan, it's quite varied, it seems, from what I'm hearing from teachers there. And in the UK, they're back in schools, for example. They're kind of my main contact points, I guess. But yes, feel free, please do share and also add questions and experiences too. So let's have a kind of a quick recap of sign of things that, yes?
Well, just introducing the idea, like we talked or we discussed for quite a while about the topic for this week,
Yes.
or and it seemed very clear that we went from this reactive position to trying to now be more proactive, hey?
Yes.
And so that's where you were going to start right now, I guess. I just wanted to set that up in
Yes.
terms of, let's review quickly what are some of those reactive experiences that we may fondly or not so fondly remember 4 months ago.
Yeah, so obviously I'm not going to cover everything. Some of these things may be familiar and resonate with you, but it's kind of just set the situation a little bit. As most teachers around the world were faced with a shift to emergency remote teaching. We don't really call it distance education, since distance education was planned that way in the beginning. Whereas most of us didn't plan anything that way. Then I think some of the ways that our experiences have been characterized in terms of a lot of kind of struggles and challenges, especially uncertainty, one week to another, what's going to be doing, what the government's going to decide, what policies, etc. Quite a bit of chaos as people are trying to figure out whether it was teachers or admin or parents, etc. What to do with technology and logistics. And quite a lot of teachers felt quite overwhelmed, as did students, parents as well. Obviously, there's some frustration, stress, and then just I know that when the break came around for a lot of people in July, there was just this huge sigh of relief to actually catch a breather, because many people obviously mentally and physically drained. So hopefully people have had a chance to recharge, and then as last month we're kind of looking to draw on some of the things we've learned, but now we kind of got a bit more headspace to free up and think about where we go. But before we do that, we touched on a couple of positive outcomes, and I think it's definitely worth looking at. I know some teachers, they were really pleased to have so much access to professional development online, and if they had the time to do it, they were finding opportunities to grow in so many different new ways. And
just for
yeah,
example, people
yeah,
who immediately had to learn how to use Padlet or Flipgrid
right,
or any of the apps that they said they would never have gotten around to learning. And it's like the whole online world suddenly advanced 10 or 20 years
yes,
within a month. It
yeah,
was a huge shift. And I've seen many teachers, thankfully saying, oh, I'm going to definitely keep using all this even if I go back to classroom. So
yeah,
you highlighted those new discoveries were an unintended positive consequence. So.
Yes, indeed. So definitely in the chat, feel free, please share, what are some of the top finds that you've had. One of mine was quizzes. I was using, I was familiar with Quizlet, for example, beforehand, and Kahoot. But quizzes worked really well with my students, and it was easy to use and adapt, borrow from other teachers and so on. So we weren't all reinventing the wheel. And that was kind of one of my kind of most happy finds, as well as things like virtual environments online. So these new discoveries, as you're saying, whether they were kind of tech things or resources or articles.
I wanted to give one shout out to the Facebook group called Online Teaching Japan.
Right, yes.
One of a local teacher in Tokyo started it up, and there are now close to 2,000 teachers in Japan and mostly other Asian countries who are just sharing everything they know. And they even had this week, something we missed is from Monday to Friday, they had a whole series of recorded reflections and methodologies and sharing ideas of what people were doing in the spring term here in Japan. So again, OTJ, Online Teaching Japan, is definitely, for anybody with a Facebook account, worth checking out. Everything you'd ever want to know is in there somewhere.
Yes, and although the people there are from Japan, it's not actually just Japan specific questions. So been really helpful, like addressing tech issues and some really kind of specific ones about how to use Google Classroom and so on.
Yep.
Okay, I think the third thing I think that came out of a lot of it was, as teachers, we were kind of forced to re-examine and reevaluate some of our teaching, and then in many ways simplify what we've done, and then get right down to kind of what are the essentials and how can we really maximize the learning experiences for our students, whether face-to-face or online. And so that kind of still sits with me as I go forward more.
Forced reflection. Yeah.
Okay. So for the I'm just scanning the chat, see if there's anything that we've missed. Yep, some people saying they're back at school as well, or online and so on. And talk a little bit about online support as we move into the second part. Yep. The thing about proactive steps that we can take, because nobody likes to be on the back foot. And kind of break these down into proactive steps if you're going back to teaching face-to-face. And also if you're having to be online, for example, whether it's using Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever else. And some of maybe the key experience or things that we know we've learned or benefited from. Would like to obviously see experiences shared in the chat as well. And, whether you work for a public or private institution, whether you have large classes, small classes, and so on. We all have a kind of a range of experiences, so it's great to be able to share.
And I like the way you've divided this up in our notes into before, during, and after teaching. I mean, that's one of the things I picked up years ago through Jack Richards, saying that, teaching is basically a series of decisions. Decisions you can make before, during, or after the lesson.
Yes.
And I'd asked you today when we were talking about it, in the current situation, I mean, I always thought the biggest bang for the buck was improving your decision making during lessons, because you have a little bit of the luxury of time on your side before the lesson and after the lesson, but when you're actually in the heat of the lesson, you can make decisions that turn you into a hero, a villain, ruin the lesson, empower somebody, create a great memory. And there are literally hundreds of decisions we make during every lesson. So, but when I asked you this, you talked about you didn't think it was during the lesson that was most important in the current situation we're in.
Yeah.
I agreed with your answer, by the way.
Yes, I think, actually, because of the shift to online and so on and dealing with new things, then in many ways it felt the planning stage had required a lot more time, and it was worth it reinvesting the time. It was almost like, when you were a more beginning teacher again. And I think about the number of hours I used to put into planning lessons, etc. And so making those decisions about what you're going to use in class and what your bang for the buck will be, what you're going to get out of it, what your students are going to get out of it, tech decisions. Is this going to be easy for the kids to do or for your students to do? There's all these kinds of little extra decisions that, you have to think about because it's just a new medium.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of been some of that there. Some teachers also shared, thank you, talking about, what you're doing for what kind of games you might be introducing, whether that's online, moving on to online, taking things that you've worked well in class and seeing you can transfer that and make it effective in a different situation.
We were talking as well, just looking back, this might be a good place to do. I've just jotted down 3 or 4 really quick reflections on that experience I had being in Zoom for 9 or 10 classes a week of 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And can we go there just for a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I think kind of touch on like kind of the main things that you took away from that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, real quick one is when students are in trouble with sound, with audio, video, with anything, tell them to reboot their computer. Tell them it's okay to leave and literally not just sleep, but shut down and restart the computer completely. And that worked 100% of the time for students that had problems. One student, it took her 15 minutes to log in because her computer was so bunged up with files and garbage. But when she restarted the computer, it completely reset everything, and she came in 30 seconds. And I was hounding her for about 3 weeks or suggesting, and finally I just said, Yuki, go out now, reboot. Okay, it's okay. She was worried about missing class, but that was a big one I learned.
Cool. So one of the things as well we talked about earlier, and we talked with another teacher from the T-cell certificate course just recently about the importance of kind of setting expectations early on. Obviously, as we transition to online, then kind of the rules are made up as we go along. How do we behave in class? What do we expect from students? Are they wearing uniforms? Where is their head on the screen? And so on. And, so you're talking about earlier, just the importance of helping students set up. And even, I've seen students do a whole semester and they've still got a bright light behind them or curtains behind them, etc. And they're not in the middle of their screen. It's difficult for their classmates to communicate with them, etc. So it's worth, I think, going back in September and getting that sorted from day one.
Yeah, so yeah, and just it's funny because I've gone into I've been invited into a few different classrooms here and there, and man, talk about first impressions. Yes. When I see everybody centered and having about the same size face, and the teacher as well, it just seems like they've got their act together and they're set up for good communication. But you gotta be the teacher in that situation and say, come on, everybody, we're here to succeed. So part of succeeding is getting set up properly.
Yes, and it's also a valuable life skill that they're surely going to need in the future anyway. So it shouldn't be any difficult. So I know obviously in some countries we're just talking about, like in the UK, I know from UK teachers, they were saying that the students have to be on camera. There was some discussion about whether or not students can turn off their camera because of fatigue and so on, but there's sometimes with young learners you might have safety concerns or regulations depending upon your country, so obviously you have to respect those.
A couple of other quicker ones were when I first started teaching on Zoom, I tried to go into breakout rooms. If I had 6 breakout rooms, I tried to go in all of them. and it was a nightmare because everybody just, you know, had a big reaction. It wasted time. So I learned very quickly to stay in one breakout room for the full activity because I really learned a lot more. Yeah, and then so that was one, to stay in a breakout room. The other one was trying to guess the timings. Hey, okay, everybody, I want you to go in, and there's 3 of you, so I want you to talk for 2 minutes each. That's 6 minutes, and sometimes they needed only the 2 minutes, and sometimes they needed 12 minutes. And so I was obviously, like every other teacher in the world, guessing. But what I started doing with some students I knew really well was said, just come back when you're finished. And that seemed to work much better because they came back, and the first couple of groups, I could chat with them to hear what, you know, what kind of stuff came up or problems they had. While, for example, if I had 6 groups, once 2 came back, then I would close the breakout room and give one final minute to the other 4 groups. You know, so I was guessing, but that seemed to work really well.
Yes. So that kind of mirrors one of the comments. Thank you, Sabah. That, you know, students aren't as tech savvy as we thought, and you know, they may be tech savvy in a particular domain, like with their app on their apps on their phone. But yes, when they're dealing with you know, a new platform, etc., there's a learning curve for everybody. So yes, taking things slowly. So for example, with my class online, I didn't do breakout rooms until everybody was comfortable with, first of all, their camera. Next was then to get used to the chat, and we're talking about the ease of using some reactions. Then once that's comfortable and I'm comfortable, then I might then say, okay, we'll use breakout room. So
let's take a moment and just unpack that idea about the different levels of ease for students, hey?
yes.
Yeah, so we got this little reaction button everybody sees down at the bottom of Zoom.
Feel
And
free
that,
to hit it if you want to.
what's that? Yeah, go ahead, press it if you like. And so that seems to be something that everybody can do and nobody really hesitates to do. Okay? And then the second one is to basically either turn on your video, and then students will start doing this. If I'll say, you know, how many people stayed up late last night, you know, or stayed up after midnight. You know, I could do questions and get answers like that. Then it was kind of getting people used to the chat, as you said, and getting them to type things. And I love that tip you mentioned today. In one tip in terms of, you know, the first person, the angel student writes a perfect answer and everybody else copies it. So what were you suggesting?
Yes. So we get this in face-to-face class, the problem of flying with the fastest, right? So I like the fact that you were talking about the output can be verbal or it can be typed. When we're doing type activity though, I like to get them to hold their answers, and then I check everyone can hand signal when they're ready, and then 1, 2, 3, go, and then everybody hit return. And then you'll see the answers come up together.
20
yes.
answers or 30 answers come up at once, and they can
Yeah.
take to compare
Yes.
and look through.
That's right. The other way is, you know, obviously with younger learners, then I'm not going to be getting them to type on the keyboard so much, and they might be on an iPad. So get them to write down on a piece of paper with like a big crayon for the younger ones, and they can hold it, and then they 1, 2, 3, and then they flip it.
Good. So in that sort of hierarchy of, so we say putting using a reaction button might be
hand is the easiest.
Yeah, and then putting your hand up with your videos on, and then chatting, and then finally is the speaking. And just always remembering that speaking is really hard for some people in so many different levels, right? You know, and therefore I've come across the idea that output is output. And if some people give me brilliant answers that are typed out or written out, and they're actually much better than some people who are very happy to just speak, but not speak with so much quality. So
yes,
there's a range on both. They're both valid in my mind.
And you know, as a parent too, and seeing my kindy and my primary age kids taking classes online and so on, then it was good to see things from a different perspective. And one of the things that I noticed is, sometimes the teacher's really trying hard to help a kid answer and say, calling their name and calling on them. But actually kids react differently, of course. And, there's, for kids who are very shy, they actually can react quite negatively to it. They feel a lot of pressure and everyone's waiting for them and looking for them. And then it's like my own son actually just was like, I don't want to go on, I don't want to answer the teacher. But, communicating with parents is really valuable, because being able to let the teachers know, then they're like, oh, right, yeah, I didn't realize. So then they know now, they just ask kids once or twice, and if they don't get an answer, they just move on. So I think kind of small considerations that actually have a bigger payoff are important.
The last one I just wanted to mention as a reflection of the whole first term was that idea that somebody gave me about the students can't really do 90 minutes at the very beginning of a course on Zoom. Teachers can't do 90 minutes. Just the time, it felt like I was kind of listening, being a veteran teacher, I was kind of listening to my own body and watching the students, and it was about 55 or 60 minutes of pretty, focused, work, listening, reading, writing, listening, speaking. And then I would basically give the hosting power to a nice sharp student and say, hey, anybody who wants to hang out and talk and get to know each other and whatever, girl talk. I'm at a women's university, so I said, it's girl talk time. And they all smile, and they would stay. Most of them would stay for the full remaining half hour doing the socialization that was ripped out of their lives,
Yeah, absolutely. And, actually, you told me that really early on. And that's one of the tips that I kept passing on to other teachers too, because actually one other kindergarten locally here, that's what they did they had these kind of free open sessions for the kids, just because they knew the kids were missing their playtime, missing their friends. And, they could just hang out and draw or chit chat or play in Zoom and so on. And some parents obviously did that themselves. But when you've got new kids in a school and the parents don't know each other too, then you need to kind of obviously support that. So that's definitely.
I want to give a quick shout out to a whole bunch of people in the chat who are offering comments, and that's really, really good. Unfortunately, it's so small, I'm having trouble reading it.
Okay.
I'll take a look on my computer. I'm on my little iPhone right now, and it's tiny.
Yeah, Hamdi and Sibel are having excellent contributions throughout here, and we've got nice contribution from Frozo as well. I can see
That's
the corner of my eye. So thank you. Really want
everybody sharing their ideas.
Yes, and we always go back to the chat afterwards too, and we kind of reply to anything that we didn't reply to and share useful links and so on. So.
Close that last thought about giving the students time to socialize by saying that at the end of 15 weeks, I was basically doing about 80 minutes out of the 90.
Right.
And that seemed just fine. Like everybody built up their tolerance over the course of the 15 weeks.
Right.
So just to close with that.
Yes, and there's a good point here about how long we break things and giving brain breaks to kids.
Yeah.
I just wanted to also say, for kids who've gone back into school, my kids came back and they're like, my butt hurts from sitting down for 4 hours. They're primary school kids. Unfortunately, one of my kids, one of their teachers is actually quite good at getting them up and stretching, doing some activity by their desk, by their chair. But, unfortunately, they haven't had outdoor time and so on. So it's a real struggle. And my own kids and my kids in my classes know that I teach them, if the bum is numb, the brain is the same. I hope they didn't say that to their teacher, but,
that's why TED Talks are 20 minutes. That's
right.
The maximum, concentration before you have to get up and move around and, shake your body and then start over again. So I see Thibel has talked about 30 minutes of teaching and then intervals of 15 minutes, right?
Yes,
Great, thank you.
absolutely.
Great breaks, yes, good, good.
And I think it was on Edutopia, they had some suggestions for brain breaks there as well, if you're kind of looking, take a look. And of course, you can Google and find a lot out there shared by teachers all over the place. Yes.
The instructional design or the expectations as part of that?
Yeah, so kind of one of the things that emerged when we were talking about how we use breakout rooms, and the importance of checking instructions and how we set these things up. One of the things that we kept coming back to that ties all of this together really was about really thinking carefully about our instructional design, and kind of illustrate what we mean by this a little bit. So for example, Steve, we're talking about breakout rooms, and just as group activities, it's easy to say, okay, students, you're going to talk about an easy topic. You can choose one of these 5 topics, and you're going to talk for 3 minutes, talk to a partner, then change, tweak another topic, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. And you think, okay, away you go, that was easy, go, everyone in breakout rooms. They get to their breakout rooms, and sometimes it's just silence, right? So what went wrong?
Yeah. Obviously, what went wrong is that you missed an opportunity to check with a couple of students whether they actually knew while you had the whole group together. And that's a great habit to get them into, being on, who's he going to call? Who's he going to call? And I say, Ayaka, so tell me what you have to do. Okay, you got it? Good, you got it. Now tell everybody, let's just confirm.
Yes. Okay, so yeah, how many people in the room? How long do you have to talk? How many questions you ask, etc. And if I have lower levels, I usually let them, check to each other. They can use the chat to talk to each other. They might even use their L1 and then confirm it back with everyone. But better to have success when you let them go.
Without question, obviously, giving everybody the option of saying, I don't know, or I'm not sure, or I didn't hear it clearly, or, never chastising somebody for getting the instructions wrong, but making it an open space where people can very easily just say, I don't know, or I'm not sure, and say, okay, Aika, thanks, let's move over to Saki.
Yeah. And of course, demonstrating that with a couple of your more confident, comfortable students before they go into breakout rooms. If you can see that things are unsure. Obviously, when you have lots of people, I've got some people, they're teaching 30, 40 kids online, and they've just their screen is maxed out with little icons of people. So it's a big difference depending upon your numbers. I'd say the more you have in a class, then it's better to take things slower and exemplify and check carefully.
Yeah, most of the classes I'm referring to tonight were a minimum of 20 and about a maximum of 32.
Right.
Those are relatively, reasonable sized classes. But when you talked about the breakout rooms, we certainly have the other end that's very, very important in instructional design, in being what happens when they come back from the breakout room.
Yes, and this is the same in face-to-face classes too. We can give people an activity, and students may not see the point of doing it or feel that they need to take part and so on. It's easy to sometimes goof off or hide in a large class. Depends on obviously the maturity, the age group, motivation, and so on. But what's the key?
I always say you're going into the breakout room to practice what you're going to say when you come back in front of everybody. The breakout room is a practice session because we're going to review some of those ideas once you get back. And then when they come back, I especially in the Japanese context, I give a lot of effort points. I don't care if it's perfect or not, but I care what you think. I care about your opinion. I care about your contribution. And if you'll do that, I hold up a little piece of paper that's got all their names and attendance, and I put little dots every time somebody puts their hand up to volunteer an answer. you know, thanks Yuki, thanks Misa, thanks, you know, and give them credit for making the effort. And this gives the message to everybody that I'm not correcting them. I'm just, that we're not at the correction stage there. I might come back. It always depends on the student. If I know the student is open and is not going to be shocked or hurt by it, I'll work on it. I'll elicit something with them, but usually not. You know, usually I'll do some kind of wrap-up comment. But everybody knows that the point, once, as soon as we get back from the breakout rooms, I will go as long as the wave of energy is continuing. If I'm getting lots of different comments and different ideas, I'll go, anybody else? Anybody else? And if everybody's repeating the same thing, then I'll say, okay, let's wrap it up. Let's move on to the next activity.
So here you're really aiming to facilitate as much participation and involvement as well as interaction as possible, and focusing on communication.
Especially on the speaking side in Japan, where that's the biggest challenge, to build that sense of, hey, somebody understood me, you know, a native teacher or my teacher, my Japanese teacher, anybody, my partner, somebody understood what I said. And that gives motivation and desire to try again, you know? So it seems very, very obvious, but it does not happen all the time.
We got a quick question about, you know, use of L1 in breakout rooms. Steve, you got a really kind of nice, simple policy to get across with your L1.
Yeah,
would you share that?
Yeah, I researched this a lot in the past, and I've come up with my own, in the first day of classes, I say, I can speak and understand Japanese, but my policy is this. I want to use as much English as possible in class. I also will use as much Japanese as necessary in class. So when I see somebody not having a clue what's happening, I'll repeat it again in English, and then I'll ask them if they're still lost. I'll ask them a question in Japanese if I have to. But and so the students always react positively to this because it sounds reasonable. You know, and so if I say, I'm getting across to that, if you're in trouble, then use Japanese with me and I'll use Japanese with you if you're really in trouble. If not, then let's practice English. And it's the same in the breakout rooms, as I'm constantly, you know, joking with them. Your Japanese is good enough. You don't need to practice it anymore. Once your English is that good, then go ahead. But back to, for example, in my writing classes, they're writing in English. They'll have a brainstorming session with a couple of other people, and I'll say, go ahead. We're in a writing class, so go ahead, brainstorm in Japanese for 5 minutes. Yeah. But make sure of any of that brainstorming you like and you want to use it, make sure you translate that with your friends to make sure that you can write it. Right. You know, if you're going to be talking about the advantages of wearing a school uniform instead of casual clothes, and you got 5 great ideas, make sure you can say them in English as you're brainstorming, because you're planning to use them anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, level and context, but that's a really nice way, you know, using as much as English as possible and as little Japanese as necessary.
Yeah, or as much Japanese as necessary.
Right, yes, right. I have my one that I do because people are familiar with baseball in Japan as being a kind of thing. I kind of say, yes, if you're stuck, you can go to first base, you ask for some help in English. If you can't get help in English or understand the help you get, then go and ask for help in Japanese. And then after you've got the help in Japanese that you need, then get all the way back and go back into English. Otherwise, sometimes they just forget and they stay in Japanese. For example, when I was there, now I'm in a different context in Malaysia. It's less of an issue, but depends on where you're teaching. Okay, I'm just going to see if there's anything else in the chat. Applaud for effort points, participation points, as well as active speaking, but also active listening. I like to kind of point out, say, oh, you know, so I can see you've been listening really attentively, nodding along, so on, and also you've been kind of checking or asking questions about what people have been saying. So it's good.
I always, when students are doing this, I'll every time say, boy, he told me I like you so much because I'm looking at this big screen and you're nodding and you're getting bonus points
Yeah.
today.
Right.
And suddenly lots of people.
Right. Definitely highlight the positive role models.
Yeah, positive, encouraging positive behavior. You know, it's pretty, yeah, pretty.
So, yeah, so just to recap, breakout rooms, obviously the clear instructions, the demonstrations, checking instructions, giving students to check L1 if necessary, but also giving them a reason to, because they know that they're going to, a little bit of pressure to perform because they're going to come back and use it later.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You
Yes.
want to go into the first day of school topic?
Yes. There was just one other thing before moving on. Just give me a second.
We're all looking frantically over our notes.
We're talking about, yeah, the use of polls, and just saying that, you know, on online you're looking sometimes, you know, you might get used to, okay, we get used to the whiteboard, we've got used to kind of using the chat, but you know, you don't want things to go stale. You've obviously, you can bring images in, share your screen, etc. But getting students, for example, we talked about getting them to learn how to annotate at appropriate times so that, you know, they can, you know, mark up, either put stamps on the board or sometimes write on a board together collaboratively. And so, yes.
Just to make sure, because that annotate might not be a straightforward word for everybody, but in Zoom, you can find in the breakout rooms, right?
Yes, and also like if I share a whiteboard now, for example.
Yeah. There's an option that says annotate, and it simply means that you can, there you go. And are we going to see we're not seeing instructions at all, are we? Or the choices.
Okay. And then, yeah, so they have, you won't see it because
it's not a broadcast.
Yeah, so this is important, is obviously is to know what devices people are on. On iPad, I get a little pen icon, and if I tap on that, it opens up a menu. On PC, it's a bit different. I will look for the annotate menu. You have to be able to walk students clearly through this, obviously, if it's their first time. But students have options to draw or use stamps with different shapes, for example. They can send some love your way. You can kind of also use different shapes and symbols, etc. And they can also, for example, if there's something that people didn't understand, they say, oh, you know, I didn't understand this, or can you tell me about this?
Yeah.
So little by little, I think, can work on things that are useful and necessary.
So the point being here that we're encouraging teachers to play around with it, but also encouraging students to use this in a breakout room, for example.
Yeah. And we're not going to go into details of that because there's plenty of really good instructional videos out there already, but just as a reminder, and thinking about how we use features like polls, for example. So one really nice transition that I was with a teacher I was doing some classroom observation for was that he took the next step and wanted to use polls in his classroom, and he was fond of using them. His students were quite into them, but he got all the poll results, and then very kind of excitedly he shared his poll results, but you could see the students after about 5-10 minutes of him explaining the results of the polls and just start to lose interest. The following week, after we talked about it in follow-up, then he switched it around, he did the poll, and he didn't tell them the answers. He got them to talk about the answers and guess what things, and it was great watching them kind of guess. You saw some of this as well, Steve, right?
They just sat up and they, you know.
They're like, oh, I think, you know, this was the happiness was the most choice. Oh, and then they find out the results, and people are like, what? Nobody chose happiness. So making these small changes, and the important tweaks. And most of those changes, they harness curiosity and get students curious to want to know. So
that's all the brain rules, right? That's all about the brain and how much the brain loves novelty.
Yes.
You know? That's why everybody clicks all those stupid Facebook quizzes, you know, because we're curious.
Want to find out for sure. Okay, so speaking of finding out, I would like to find out, Steve, you're face to face and starting off the second term. So some people are going back for a second semester in September. Other people are starting a new school year. But you said something that stuck out to me.
I remember it.
Imagine it's April again because your school year starts in April.
Yeah, so
Would you like to share about that?
And so I'm going back to a first year university class. I taught them a writing class online, and I taught them a TOEIC class online. And I felt so bad for them because I had 32 students in the class, and I could never get more than 10 of them to put their videos on. And there was so much angst and sort of lack of comfort and trusting each other and all of that. So I know 5 of the students really well because they were open and willing to do things. And most of the others got scared because of those 5 maybe, that they couldn't keep up. So I'm going back to the classroom and I'm saying, welcome to university. Let's pretend it's April 1st and start from the beginning I'm hoping that building a learning community might take 3 or 4 weeks at the beginning of the year. I'm hoping I can do it in 2 or 3 weeks because they do have some interaction with each other, but it's actually so important. I've seen it year after year, the value of forgetting about the curriculum, forgetting about the syllabus, and just working on creating a learning community at the beginning where people know their role in the classroom. They know they trust other people, they make some friends, they get comfortable, you know, and the value of that cannot be overstated in my mind.
Yeah, they all support the willingness to communicate and the intention to participate.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Steve.
Yeah.
It was a really good reminder, especially like going into a second semester. Sometimes, you know, we think, oh, the students have been together already. They know each other a little bit, but it's just not quite the same
Right.
as in previous years. Okay. So yeah, it's interesting too. You can see that topic trending a lot, whether it's been on Edutopia or on articles from British Council and also on live live webinars around the globe. But people really talking about the importance of relationships and building that community. Steve, question for you. The Facebook from Alicia. Yes, the Facebook page, is that online teaching in Japan or university?
Okay, online teaching Japan as a Facebook group.
Okay, and we can go back and share the link to that later as well.
Yeah, and we can go in and put the link there, yeah, as a reply to that.
Yeah.
Online teaching Japan.
Earlier, there's just one last thing. Yeah.
We had a question about using more than 3 colors on the whiteboards. I think there's probably a wide range of answers to that depending on people's feelings about colors. The only comment I would make is just be careful with red and yellow because they can be very, very difficult to see, you know, if at any distance, you know, and but otherwise I don't have problems with colors.
Yeah, I mean, some institutions, they have particular kind of teach training on what colors are used for.
Black markers, right? That's all there are, red, black, and blue.
Right, some don't have choice. Me, I've got a set of 10, I think, but I don't use all of them. Like you're saying, orange doesn't come out, for example.
Right.
So, and then if it's online, on screen, then yes, thinking about what is visible. And also, of course, some people may be accessing on a mobile phone, a parent's old mobile phone. They may have a smaller screen, so just being aware of those things. Okay, so we've looked at some of the lessons we've learned, the proactive steps we're going to be taking for both if we're teaching online as well as on face-to-face. And some of the main points underlie is thinking about instructional design and going back and reflecting on what we're doing and how we're going to juggle some of the tech and the activities to make sure that they run smoothly.
Mm. It's been a whirlwind of an hour, hasn't it?
There's a couple of student questions just coming in, and how teachers to, yeah, Hamdi, this is a question about shadow teachers. I'd just like to get some clarification, if you can, Hamdi, on what you mean by shadow teachers, and then we can get back to you.
It might be like an assistant teacher or a backup teacher in the room. You have to be careful. We're in Japan where we have ninja. And the ninja are the people wearing all black who slide in and out without being noticed. So that could be a shadow teacher as well for us. So.
Right. Oh, okay, yes. He's talked about special needs. So sometimes, there's another word I've heard more recently. Sometimes you may have a teacher who's assisting students with special needs who's also in a classroom. Yeah, that's out of my area of expertise. I did see recently there was an article on helping neurodiverse students in the classroom. I think that was from the British Council or Edutopia, I can't remember because I saw both of them this week. But to check out that there. Okay.
Well, I had a listening class a number of years ago, and one of the teachers brought in a young lady to the class, brought her into class and said, "This is Maki, she can't hear anything. She's got zero hearing." And I just smiled and I said, "And this is a listening class, okay, let's figure it out." And last year I had a student in university who is blind, and we just figured, one of my favorite students, and so some students with physical handicaps are so good at the compensation strategies that I just said, "Teach me." I said to her, "Teach me what you need."
Yes, that's a great starting point.
Anything I do that doesn't work, tell me. Be direct. And she was so good. Stephen, bigger. Stephen, move over. Stephen, come here. Good.
Right. And that was actually one of the top tips from one of the iTDi blog contributors, which we just shared recently because it came up last month. And in the iTDi blog, we talk about helping special needs as well. So there's good articles there. Okay.
It's all communication, right, Phil? It's just communicate well. In any situation, you're going to do better than if you don't communicate well.
Yes. And obviously, when people have special needs, they're more familiar with their special needs than we are. So asking them is a great starting point. How can I help you? Help you.
Right? Wrap it up.
Right. Okay. Lastly, we're going to be looking at things not to miss out on. So 5 things we want to just touch on so that you don't miss out on. For people that would like to continue this topic and talk about going back to school, but also have a chance to talk more freely in an open forum, I'm delighted to say that our good friend Vance Stevens, who's over with Learning Together and Webheads in Action, they have an event online on Sunday. Just share the screen so it's a bit easier. That's being shown here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And this is they have a weekly session and they do open mics, sandbox funny enough, as you can see. Chance to share your ideas, share some of your experience and ask questions. So pop along to there if you'd like to do so. And secondly, coming up at the beginning of September, Aziz Sorbai, who's been a great contributor to our blog, has set up Everyone Academy. And he's been doing a series of webinars with Professor Stephen Krashen, who is also one of our faculty and long-term contributor of a free course for iTDi, academic writing. And he's been doing these webinars and interviews that completely freely accessible. And the next one is a chance to hear answers to your questions. So that's coming up in early September. The third thing just want to share is that I heard we have a flash sale on. So there is a 50% off on all of the self-study courses. We have courses on a range of topics from teacher to teacherpreneur, drama in the ELT classroom. Penny has got her course here with course materials design. There's things on blended learning. Scott Thornbury and Penny, Stephen Crash's course you can see, motivation, Jill Hadfield, and so on. So these are all at 50%, and there is a coupon which we've not given out to anyone. So anyone watching now, you are the first to get the coupon codes if you like. It's valid until the 15th of September, and it's self-study 50. I will highlight it there and share it later. Okay. Sorry, that's all on.
Yeah, we're seeing all your
I know.
I want to get out of there.
So I will put that in there, but self-study 50 for coupon code of all of those. Okay, and they will share the link as well to make things easy. There's a couple of free courses too if you just want to dip in and see what they're like. iTDi T-cell certificate. We'll talk more about that next month, but we will have a cohort hopefully starting up in October. So we'll get an announcement for that soon.
So this is a full. This is Phil's baby. We worked on this together for years, building up a full 140-hour TESOL certificate. And Phil's the director of that program. He's an amazing, amazing tutor. We've got oodles of testimonials to prove that. So if you're interested at all in getting a full 140-hour course with feedback on your real teaching lessons and a small community to work with, please go check it out. It's absolutely a course that's full of all of our love, knowledge, and best efforts. So check it out.
And content has been written by Scott Thornbury and Adrian Doff and their team of leading ELT experts from around the field.
Yeah.
So yeah, we won't go into that in a lot of detail now, obviously, but that is coming up. So please watch this space. And lastly, Scott's course for September, as some of you know, we had a couple of people message us to share their disappointment about not being able to get into September. So we went and spoke with Scott, and so he's going to run a second course. So the same course again, but in November. So if you missed out on the September one or couldn't do it for whatever reason, but would like to, I could look into Dogma ELT, then there'll be a next start date from the 8th of September. That is open for registration now.
8th of November.
Yes, I didn't say that, did I? Sorry. Yeah, so, 8th of November.
But just for anybody who doesn't really know, the Dogma ELT was actually originated by Scott Thornbury, and he writes about it in the description below as an approach or a mindset that is conversation driven and focuses on emerging language. So it's very, very real. It's kind of materials light. It's very, very practical and a huge, huge following. And to have an opportunity to get it from Scott Thornbury is indeed a rare privilege. So check it out. There are only going to be about 30 spaces more in the November course, and they will go quickly. So get in there and check it out. We also have a very set number of scholarships. We offer some partial scholarships, and we'll even offer some full scholarships on a need by need basis. So go in and check it out. I promise you it's going to be a course you'll remember throughout your teaching career.
Okay, absolutely. So that's all we have time for today.
That's it. We're
Thank you
done.
very much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
We're back every month, pretty much.
Ah,
We look forward to having you back
well,
again.
we don't know if the world is going to be here in a month. So we'll see. We hope to be back in a month.
For sure. Thanks again, and good morning, good evening, good night.
From iTDi, the International Teacher Development Institute. We're happy to work with you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.